Have you ever wondered what it looks like when the soul is surgically removed from the body, leaving only the twitching, screaming meat behind to fend for itself in a cold, indifferent room? That is the question that assaults you when you stand before the terrifying grandeur of a painting by Francis Bacon. To enter his visual world is not to enter a gallery in the traditional sense. It is to step into a beautifully lit operating theater where the patient has woken up in the middle of surgery, and the surgeon has gone to the bar for a stiff drink. We are not dealing here with the comfort of traditional beauty, nor are we dealing with the intellectual games of pure abstraction that dominated the art world of his time. We are dealing with a direct, calculated assault on the nervous system. Francis Bacon is the great realist of the 20th century, not because he painted people as they look in the mirror, but because he painted them as they feel inside. Bundles of nerves, flesh, anxiety, and desperation, trapped in the invisible cage of their own existence. He stripped away the veneer of civilization, the suit, the tie, and the social niceties, to reveal the animal that lives beneath the skin. To understand the sheer magnitude of Bacon's achievement, one must first understand the artistic landscape he detonated. While his American contemporaries in New York were throwing paint to create abstract fields of energy and spiritual transcendence, Bacon refused to let go of the figure. He was obstinate. He believed that the human body was the only subject worth painting, but he knew that after the horrors of the Second World War, after the concentration camps and the atomic bomb, you could not paint a portrait in the old way. You could not paint a polite gentleman sitting in a chair and call it truth. Truth had become something messier, something violent, something disjointed. Bacon realized that to capture the reality of the modern human, you had to distort the appearance to reach the sensation. You had to injure the image to make it live. The aesthetic of Francis Bacon is built upon a profound and unapologetic atheism. This is crucial to understanding the tension in his work. There is no God in his universe, no afterlife, no redemption, and no spiritual safety net. There is only the here and now, the physical sensation of being alive, and the inevitable rot of the grave. He famously described humans as potential carcasses. When you look at his figures, you are seeing meat. He painted the human head not as a vessel for the spirit, but as a slab of protein that screams, eats, mates, and vomits. This sounds grim, but in Bacon's hands, it becomes possessed of a perverse, exhilarating vitality. He elevates the biological reality of the body to the status of high tragedy. He forces us to look at our own mortality, not with fear, but with a cold, hard, clinical stare that finds beauty in the decay. Technically, Bacon was a gambler, and his painting process was a game of high-stakes roulette. He did not methodically build up a painting like the old masters he admired. He courted the accident. He would load a large brush with oil paint and throw it at the canvas. He would use a rag, a sponge, or even a cashmere sweater to scrub the paint, smearing the face he had just spent hours painting. Why would he do this? Because he believed that the accident bypassed the rational brain. If you try to paint a nose, it looks like an illustration of a nose. It looks dead. But if you throw paint at the canvas and it accidentally forms a shape that suggests a nose, it feels real. It feels organic. It captures what he called the brutality of fact. He wanted the paint to come across directly onto the nervous system, without the intervention of the intellect. He wanted the image to coagulate out of the chaos, like a wound healing or a bruise forming on the skin. One of the most distinctive and technically rebellious features of his work is his choice of surface. Bacon painted on the unprimed reverse side of the canvas. Most artists paint on the smooth, white primed front. Bacon preferred the raw, brown, rough weave of the back. This was a critical decision. The unprimed fabric is absorbent. It sucks the oil out of the paint, creating a matte, dry, almost pastel-like texture that contrasts violently with the thick, shiny strokes of impasto he would layer on top. This technique is unforgiving. If you make a mistake on unprimed canvas, you cannot simply wipe it off, because the stain has already penetrated the fiber. This added to the risk of his process. Every mark had to be decisive. The tooth of the raw canvas grabbed the paint, allowing him to drag dry brushes across the surface to create the look of striated muscle or blurred motion. It gives the paintings a gritty, tactile quality that feels like skin or sandpaper. The background in a Bacon painting is a masterpiece of deceptive simplicity. He often used flat, saturated fields of color: bright orange, acidic green, harsh lilac, or deep blood red. These are not the colors of nature. They are the colors of artificiality. They are the colors of interior design, of luxury apartments, or of sterile institutional corridors. This creates a jarring dissonance. You have this violent, organic, messy figure, a blob of distorted flesh, set against a background that is pristine, flat, and vividly colored. The contrast heightens the horror. It is the horror of a murder committed on a brand new carpet. It suggests that violence is not something that happens in dark alleys. It is something that happens in the brightly lit rooms of civilization. We must speak of the mouth. In the history of art, the mouth is usually closed or slightly open in a smile. In Bacon, the mouth is a cavern. It is often wide open, teeth bared, frozen in an eternal scream or a spasm of retching. Bacon was obsessed with the mouth as a physiological opening. He studied medical textbooks on diseases of the mouth, fascinated by the glitter of saliva and the colors of the interior of the throat. He looked at the screaming nurse in Sergei Eisenstein's film Battleship Potemkin, keeping a still image of her shattered glasses and open mouth in his studio. For Bacon, the scream was not just an expression of emotion. It was the body turning itself inside out. It was the abyss. But, and this is the Baconian paradox, he often painted these screaming mouths with a lushness, a beauty of paint, that makes them almost erotic. He confuses the scream of pain with the gasp of sexual ecstasy. He blurs the line between suffering and pleasure, reminding us that both are extreme states of the nervous system where the rational mind shuts down. Photography played a massive role in his vision, but not in the way realistic painters use it. Bacon did not paint from life. He preferred to paint from photographs. He famously said the presence of the model inhibited him. He wanted to do violence to the image, and he could not do that with a real person sitting in front of him. He surrounded himself with photographs, mugshots of friends, medical x-rays, and most importantly, the motion studies of Edward Muybridge. Muybridge's 19th century photos of men wrestling and animals running broke down movement into frames. Bacon looked at these and saw something else. He saw the blur. He saw the way bodies merge and dissolve into one another when they grapple. He used this blur to distort his figures. A face in a Bacon painting often looks like it is moving at high speed, or like it has been caught in a camera flash while shaking. This smear of paint destroys the likeness but captures the presence. It captures the fleeting nature of life. We are not statues. We are moving, changing, deteriorating biological events. The furniture in his paintings acts as a stage prop for the human drama. It is modern, tubular steel furniture, the kind you might find in a Bauhaus catalog or a dentist's waiting room. It is cold, hard, and functional. It contrasts with the soft, vulnerable nature of the flesh. The figures often seem to flow off the chairs, as if their bones have turned to liquid. This juxtaposition of the hard industrial object and the soft, organic body emphasizes the fragility of the human form. The chair remains. The body decays. There is also a subtle menace in these objects. A bed can look like a crime scene. A chair can look like an electric chair. Bacon transforms the domestic setting into a theater of cruelty, where the furniture itself seems to be participating in the interrogation of the subject. One cannot discuss Bacon without addressing the format of the triptych. He frequently painted 3 canvases to be displayed together. This was a format traditionally reserved for religious altarpieces, depicting the crucifixion or the saints. Bacon hijacked this religious format and secularized it. He put his twisted, drinking, screaming figures onto the altar. The triptych allowed him to create a sense of cinematic sequence without telling a linear story. He hated storytelling in art. He did not want a narrative. He wanted the images to interact with each other across the wall. The eye moves from the left panel to the center to the right, creating a rhythm, a visual sentence. It isolates the figures in their separate frames, emphasizing their loneliness, yet binds them together in a formal relationship. It creates a monumental scale for his private obsessions. Bacon's treatment of the face is perhaps his most radical contribution to art history. He dismantled the portrait. If you look at a portrait by Rembrandt, you see the soul through the eyes. If you look at a portrait by Bacon, you see the injury. He smears the eye sockets, twists the jaw, displaces the ear. He turns the face into a piece of putty. Yet, miraculously, if you know the people he painted, his lovers like George Dyer or Peter Lacey, his friends like Lucian Freud, you can still recognize them. He captures their gait, their posture, the specific tension of their personality. He captures the likeness by destroying the appearance. He called this the injury of the portrait. He believed that by distorting the face, he could reach a deeper level of reality than a camera ever could. He was stripping away the social mask to show the raw meat of the personality underneath. Let us dig deeper into the concept of the gladiator arena. Bacon often creates a curved floor in his paintings, a sort of amphitheater or ring. The figure is placed in the center of this ring. This suggests that the figure is on display, performing for an invisible audience. It turns the act of living into a spectacle. We are the voyeurs looking into the pit. The figure is naked, exposed, writhing under the harsh glare of a naked light bulb. And that light bulb is another key symbol. It hangs from the ceiling, a single unshaded electric light. It is the light of the interrogation room. It casts no romantic shadows. It illuminates everything with a harsh, clinical clarity. It is the light of truth. And in Bacon's world, the truth is not pretty. Bacon's relationship with the past was aggressive. He loved Velázquez, Michelangelo, and Rembrandt, but he wanted to reinvent them for the age of photography and film. He famously obsessed over Velázquez's portrait of Pope Innocent X. He painted dozens of variations of it, known as the Screaming Popes. But here is the crucial detail. Bacon deliberately refused to see the original painting in Rome, even when he was in the same city. He preferred to work from a black and white reproduction. He stripped the Pope of his authority. He put the Pope in an electric chair. He made the Pope scream. He took the ultimate symbol of order, religion, and power, and turned him into a frightened man in a cage. He was not mocking the Pope. He was humanizing him through terror. He was showing that even the most powerful men are just meat, subject to the same fears and the same decay as the rest of us. One must also consider the role of glass. Bacon insisted that his paintings be framed under glass. This is highly unusual for oil paintings, which are usually displayed naked to avoid reflections. Bacon wanted the glass. He wanted the reflection. When you stand in front of a Bacon, you see the painting, but you also see your own reflection in the glass, superimposed over the screaming figure. You become part of the painting. Your face merges with the distorted face on the canvas. It implicates the viewer. It also creates a distance, a clinical separation between you and the visceral mess of the paint. It is like looking at a dangerous animal through the safety of a reinforced window. The theme of the shadow in Bacon's work is peculiar. His shadows do not behave according to the laws of physics. They are often thick, black pools that look like puddles of tar or blood. They ooze out from under the figure. Sometimes the shadow has a different shape than the figure casting it. It is as if the shadow is a separate entity, a dark spirit or a stain that cannot be washed away. This adds to the surreal, dreamlike logic of the space. The figure is anchored to the ground not by gravity, but by this dark, sticky substance of the shadow. Bacon's influence on our perception of the human body is immense. He showed us the body as a meat machine. He showed us the body in spasm. He was fascinated by medical books showing skin diseases and deformities, not out of morbidity, but because he saw in them a widening of the possibilities of form. He saw beauty where others saw only repulsion. He forces us to question our definitions of beauty. Is beauty only symmetry and health? Or can there be a terrible beauty in the way a body twists in pain, or the way a face dissolves in a moment of extreme emotion? Bacon argues for the latter. He expands the vocabulary of human feeling. The violence in Bacon's work is not the violence of a war movie. It is not action violence. It is static violence. It is the violence of holding a pose for too long. It is the violence of a hangover. It is the violence of introspection. The figures are not being attacked by external enemies. They are being attacked by their own internal demons, by their own memories, by their own biology. The scream comes from within. This makes the violence universal. We may not have been tortured in a cell, but we have all felt the torture of anxiety, of loneliness, of regret. Bacon gives these invisible feelings a physical form. He turns the psychological condition into a physiological fact. One distinct element is the arrow or the circle that occasionally appears, painted flatly on top of the complex figure. These look like letraset transfers or scientific diagrams. An arrow might point to a wound. A circle might highlight a face. This emphasizes the clinical, analytical nature of his gaze. It is as if he is a doctor pointing out the symptoms of the human disease. It breaks the illusion of the painting and reminds us that this is a constructed image, a diagram of sensation. It creates a friction between the painterly, messy figure and the cold, graphic symbol. Why does Bacon's work continue to hold such a grip on the public imagination? Because he tells the truth about the dark side of the human condition without sentimentality. He does not offer false comfort. He does not offer religion. He offers the raw, undeniable fact of the body. In a world that is increasingly virtual, increasingly sanitized, and increasingly obsessed with the perfect filtered image, Bacon's work is a shock to the system. It reminds us of our physical reality. It reminds us that we are animals. It reminds us that we bleed. Bacon's studio at 7 Rees Mews in London was legendary. A chaotic den of torn photographs, paint tubes, champagne bottles, and dust, which stood in stark contrast to the controlled emptiness of his paintings. This mess was his compost heap. It was where images fermented. He needed the chaos around him to create the order on the canvas. It serves as a potent metaphor for his mind, a place where disparate images, a warlord, a lover, a medical diagram, collided and fused together. Ultimately, Francis Bacon's art is a celebration of vitality in the face of death. It is not depressing, it is exhilarating. To paint death and decay with such energy, with such lust for the material of paint, is an act of defiance. He stares into the void and paints it with gold frames and brilliant orange backgrounds. He affirms the sensation of living, even if that sensation is painful. He teaches us that the nervous system is the ultimate reality, and that art is the only way to trap the raw sensation of life and hold it still for a moment before it rots away. He is the dark poet of the flesh, the master of the beautiful scream, and the architect of the invisible cages that hold us all. When you leave the presence of his paintings, the world looks different. Faces on the subway look distorted. The meat in the butcher shop window looks like a portrait. The silence of your own room feels a little heavier. This is the power of great art. It alters your perception of reality. Bacon strips the world of its illusions and leaves us with the brutality of fact. And in that brutality, in that raw, exposed meat, there is a strange, terrible, and undeniable beauty that commands us to keep our eyes wide open, even when we want to scream.